Recording. Okay, I think there we go. Yep, that worked. Okay, so again, thank you for joining us today. My name is Twyla. I'm the Director of Outreach at the Department of Higher Ed, and I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Jen to introduce herself.
Thank you, Twyla. Thanks everyone for joining us today for, I guess, our season finale, the Lunch and Learns. But appreciate your time during your lunch. I am Jennifer Lucero, the Outreach Navigator for the department, and I will hand it over to Sophie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Twyla and Jennifer. My name is Sophie Vogel. I'm the CASFA coordinator, and I appreciate you all being here. Cody?
Yes, thank you very much, Sophie. My name is Cody Eden. I'm the FAFSA coordinator with the Colorado Department of Higher Education. Super excited to be here today. We know it's a busy time in your school year. We are gonna mostly dive right in, and I'm gonna introduce our first guest speaker. Matt Carpenter is coming to us from College Aid Pro. If counselors or others in the room are not familiar, certainly something to take a look at, some excellent resources around financial aid and student support services. So without further ado, I'll let Matt give a better introduction than that, but we're super excited to have you here, and go ahead and take it away, Matt.
I'll take it. Thanks for the introduction, Cody. And yeah, for anybody that wants to learn a little bit more about how we partner with school counselors, I put a link in the chat so you can get some dirt on us, get to know us again a little bit better. And we kind of our whole why we exist is to try to help all the stakeholders in this space, but specifically students and parents, try to figure out how to navigate the affordability part of this process, right? Which, as you guys know, gets more challenging every single year, gets more expensive, more convoluted, the whole thing, right? So we kind of serve to try to cut through that as much as possible, empower you all to be able to. We always I like to use this term. Cody hears me say it, once every other week, of like, us with school counselors, I think are like the tip of the spear for this, challenge, problem, whatever we want to call it, when it comes to affording and paying for college. And so that, we're teammates essentially. And again, anything that we can do to support you all so you can have that trickle down in your schools, in your districts, et cetera, that's what we're trying to do here. So again, we try to provide a ton of resources, whether that's education, whether that's our kind of platform. But anyways, make your lives a little bit easier and give you some more tools as you're trying to help families, make this happen and have great outcomes, right? Specifically on the financial side. So I think it's going to be best for me. I'm going to take, again, kind of 20 to 30 minutes here and just work in and out of a few decks. One of them is more just this financial aid 101. I'm going to assume there's just a foundation of knowledge for everybody here, and just kind of rip through some of the stuff and more talk about here's how we present it to colleges. Anybody that wants any resources that I share today, just let me know. If you want to have the deck and repurpose it, or either of these decks, they're yours. So just kind of keep that in mind. I also think I'd love to just make it as interactive as possible. If you have questions, break in. I don't want to take away from you guys' format. So if I'm wrong, redirect me, Cody. But whether it's in Q&A or you want to, just screaming into the mic, whatever you want, ask questions. Certainly with what I'm talking about, the subject matter, which is not going to be unique or new to anybody here. But also, we pay really close attention to what's going on in the higher education space every day. So all these changes that are happening with, whether they're proposed from this administration or some of the dominoes we're already seeing fall, we pay really, really close attention to that stuff. So if you have any questions around what's going on, or if I can help clarify some things that you're not crystal clear on, to the extent that I'm able to, please fire away, because I think we have a decent grasp of what's going on, but obviously, famous last words, we'll just wait till tomorrow type of deal. All right, are we looking at my screen? If I can get a head nod or something. All right. So again, that's our deal. We're trying to make, college, again, the affordability piece accessible and affordable for everybody. Again, I'm not going to walk you guys through this, but this is our thought process when anytime we get in front of a room, which again is primarily parents and then students, because that's who, in our experience, pays the most attention to this affordability piece. But we'll get, as parents, but we'll get students on there too. but we always try to start like really meta and simple, like high level, how does this whole thing work? And then have them leave with, yes, an understanding of how this process works from a high level, but more importantly, how's it going to work for me? Where does my family fit on this kind of financial aid scholarship spectrum, right? What are colleges actually going to cost me? Who's going to give me discounts? Is it need-based, right? Is it merit-based? Is it both? So again, we'll walk them through the 101. Here's how need-based financial aid works. Cost of attendance minus SAI/EFC equals need. Right. Again, I'm not going to bore you guys with that, but I think there's a couple of talking points specifically on this slide that are not necessarily all common knowledge in my experience, even if you have some experience with this. So we'll spend a little bit time going, okay, you guys get it. SAI is important here in terms of how it pertains to your need-based financial aid eligibility. What are some things we need to know about SAI? And again, another one of our themes are, what are the controllables versus what's out of our control? Because we want to be really good at controlling the controllables. So we want to make sure that we're not making these mission critical mistakes that are so easy to make, like reporting your retirement accounts on the FAFSA. So have families understand that. What is the difference between a retirement account and not a retirement account? And let's make sure, again, we don't make arguably the biggest mistake people make on the financial aid applications, and that's reporting retirement accounts on the FAFSA, right? We talk about the fact that, yes, when colleges are looking at income, they're looking at the prior tax year. For you class 2026 folks, it's your 24 taxes that you just got done or you're on extension for. That's kind of the year first they're going to look at from an income standpoint, but your assets are reported in real time. Okay. And then we'll kind of dive into those, and I will in a second here. We get this question all the time. I'm sure you guys too. Well, what about debt? What about our car loans? What about our credit cards? Again, the short answer is that's not considered within these formulas. But if you're a family that has a meaningful amount of consumer debt, the onus is on you to make that crystal clear. Here's exactly what it is. Here's what we owe. Here's how that impacts our ability to pay for college. And that is something that can potentially be leveraged during the appeal part of the process with certain colleges. So that's where we'll expand upon that a little bit. We're always coaching them up on the appeal process. Again, one of these things that can be really important and is not necessarily common knowledge. And we'll also flag that the other places that debt is considered within the formula is if you're a business owner, right? You got that will be considered in your favor when these colleges are looking at the total value of your business. And if you're a homeowner, if you own your primary residence, right? As we all know, there's a meaningful amount of colleges that consider the equity in your home to be fair game. So debt can play a factor in that formula. So assets, right? We'll kind of explain to them to the formula, how the formula works in terms of any money that's in the student's name. These colleges are going to put way more emphasis on any money that's in their name versus your name as parents. And so we usually use an example like, hey, maybe you have an industrious kid and they've saved $10,000 and they, via their whatever, first communion, bar mitzvah money, summer jobs, etc. It's not a huge, pot of money there, but it's enough to move the needle in terms of your financial aid eligibility. If that same $10,000 is in your name as parents, it's really not. So again, it matters how we present that information, and that's a variable that we can control. Another really, really common mistake that's easy to make is that parents that have had the ability to save money for college via a 529 account, most people assume, and I totally get this, easy mistake to make, they assume that that's the kid's money. Right? We get these statements. It has my student's name on the statement. It has their social security number. It's for college. It must be their asset. No, it's not. You as the parent own that money. They are just the beneficiary. And again, that matters because if the money's in the student's name, colleges are going to look at up to 25% of that money. If it's in a parent's name, it's closer to 5-6%. So again, that swing is very, very meaningful. So again, just helping them avoid these what can potentially be mission critical mistakes. And then we'll just kind of go through some of the other more common savings vehicles, UGMAs, UTMAs. Any custodial accounts are in fact student assets. So if you're a family that has that, investment vehicles as a means to save for college, we'll want to explain to them their options and you know, because sometimes and these are some relatively new changes. Depending on where they're invested, who they're invested, how they're invested, they can be rolled into a 529 account without any tax ramifications. And now that money can be considered the parent assets as opposed to the students. And we're still accomplishing the same deal where that money's being used for colleges, but we're not getting as whacked from a financial aid standpoint, right? There's some the devil's in the details there, so we're always kind of careful to be like, look, this is not a firm recommendation, this is not universal advice, we're not saying everybody should do this, but it's an option for some of you that you'll probably want to take a close look at. Okay. We'll talk about the real estate piece, right? All colleges are going to look at real estate that is not your primary residence. So if you have a vacation property, investment properties, etc., but if you own your primary residence, that can matter. So we'll give them strategies to say, okay, how do you present your home equity, you know, to these colleges, and talk about different ways that they can use, you know, the lowest defensible value when presenting their again market value of their property to these colleges, but also just flagging the fact that it is a relevant variable for some colleges that you might be applying to, right? And you know, Colorado College and University of Denver, for you guys being a couple examples here. And obviously, again, we'll kind of walk them through, okay, here's the prior tax year. This is what that means. You have to reapply for financial aid every year. And then we'll spend a little time on merit-based aid, right? To just say, hey, a percentage of you, it may be that you're not eligible for need-based financial aid. And there's not a magic wand that we or anybody can wave to change that. So what are some of the ways that you can get discounts? And there's a couple things we'll talk about. You know, we'll remind them that, look, for most colleges, just by applying to the school, you're going to be applying for their merit-based scholarships. However, there are exceptions. And one of our main themes is you know, let's not lose money, let's not leave money on the table. So I like to kind of pick on NYU, right, as being one of a great example here, where really popular college, right, each year in terms of number of applications received, obviously very expensive. Merit scholarships do exist there, right, if you're a competitive student. However, if you want to even be considered for those, you have to do both the FAFSA and the CSS profile in order to be considered for merit-based scholarships. Now, again, and of course, that's not the only school, but our takeaway is that, look, even if you're not eligible for need-based financial aid, let's make sure that, again, we're at least giving ourselves the option to be considered for discounts, regardless of where we're applying. And we'll share the fact that, you know, not every school offers scholarships. And for a lot of parents that are sending their kids to school now, that wasn't a thing. If they went to college during kind of their time, every college offered scholarships. You know, all the Ivies. And again, I'm actually happen to be at MIT at the moment, right? Nobody's here on a scholarship, right? As brilliant as all these kids are, right? Walking around this campus. And then again, this kind of goes back to that appeal strategy that we're always trying to keep relatively front of mind, is that even if we're in the list building phase, we always want to apply to competing schools, right? So, you know, across the water here, I can see BU in Northeastern, and it's very common actually that if, and maybe you guys have had experience, you know, you send kids out, kids come to Boston to look at colleges, and, you know, maybe they really didn't like BU because it was just too urban. It's kind of built into our city, which it is. Whereas Northeastern, they got more of that campus feel, and they got the co-op program. So maybe they came home and said, hey, look, I love Northeastern. I hated BU. From our standpoint, we will still make them, right? Strongly encourage them to apply to BU, even if they have no intention of going there, because it's going to help us get a better deal from Northeastern. So we like to coach them up on that concept, right? Obviously, I'm picking on two schools here, but it is not unique to them. The other thing that we will, let's see if I can find my right tab here. So then we'll encourage them, right? This is our platform where we'll encourage them, you know, set up your free account. And now that you understand kind of what SAI is and how it, you know, the role that it plays in this whole process, learn what yours is. And kind of to further confuse everybody, there's two different types of SAIs. There's the federal SAI and there's the institutional SAI. And we'll explain to them a little bit like, well, why is there a range at institutional SAI schools? Well, if you're a homeowner, some schools that use the institutional methodology will look at all of your home equity. Some will look at none of it. Some will look at somewhere in between based on your income, right? We're getting in the weeds now, but we'll just try to help them understand that every college has different business models, and you have to understand what's the business model of the colleges that we're applying to or considering. And more importantly, what are we going to actually pay there, right? And I like to show some examples. This is a Massachusetts family here, right? And this family is going to pay a lot less to go to Columbia than they are to go to the state flagship university, right here in Massachusetts. And again, I'm sure you guys see this all the time, right? Usually, some families it's going to be cheaper to go to Colorado College than it is to go to UC Boulder, right? Based on their SAI and based on the college's business model. So we always say that you need to, in our dream world, and this is still a dream world for the most part, not aligned with reality. Before a family even goes to tour a campus, they're going to know here's what's going to cost me, right? And here's what it looks like next up, and here's what it's cost over 4 years when we bake in inflation and siblings going in and out of school versus my budget. Here's the outcome. Here's how much me and or my kid's going to have to borrow, and at least from a color by numbers standpoint, how does that how does that fit within an affordability profile, which is what we're trying to help them understand here. And again, they can put it in any school and it'll tell them, here's what it's going to cost. Are you going to get merit? Are you going to get need? How much for every college in the country that we have every scholarship that they offer and the qualifications for each. So, we like to think of it as a good kind of all in one place platform, again, specifically when it comes to the financial aid and scholarship component. And how are you using it this time of year? We're just kind of getting to the end of this part of it. Is once families get accepted in the school, they upload their award letters and we'll translate them, right? So last year we did this study with the a branch of the Gates Foundation. We found that of 3,000 colleges that we looked at, there was 914 different ways award letters were presented, right? So it gets pretty stinking confusing. The technology's put it into one kind of uniform apples to apples award letter to hopefully just take out some of the noise. And then we'll tell you, did you get a good deal? Are you like my buddies at Boston College here that traditionally under awards families $10,000 unbeknownst to them? So we'll kind of flag it. So when you do go back to appeal, you'll know, okay, what's a reasonable amount more to ask for. Okay. So again, that's where we like to show them some kind of case study stuff and have them be encouraging them to look at, okay, as we're learning how this process works from a high level, how's it going to work for me, right? And my family. And then we have a few different presentations around the FAFSA and the CSS profile. We have really granular, like literally line by line presentations, which I'll just rip through a few slides in a second here, but again, we won't get that exotic today. We won't have too much fun during a lunch hour, but at least even early in the process, we want to plant seeds with guys to know, like, this is something we encourage everybody to do. Why should everybody do the FAFSA? Even if you're not eligible for need-based financial aid, we'll talk about stuff like the federal direct student loan, and again, making sure that we're at least eligible for all merit-based scholarships. Go create your FSA IDs now. Here's how and where to do that, right? Deadlines are mission critical, right? And every college has different deadlines and different requirements, and the onus is on you as parents and students to figure out what are the colleges you're applying to, what do they require, when is it due, how is it due, et cetera. So we'll try to beat them over the head with that. And then again, the CSS profile, it doesn't get as much, press, for lack of a better word, but for the schools that require it, it's really the only form that matters. And this one's the beast, right? This, as you guys all know, we usually like to say, and again, I don't say this in every audience. I'm gonna take a stab here, but usually we say, like, you can get through the FAFSA with a couple beers, but you're gonna need a 30-pack to get through the CSS profile, right? That's staying here. Don't worry, everybody. We won't say that for the parents, but or especially for the students. But the point is that I think this is a form that gets people to rip their hair out, right? So we'll spend a little bit more time going through, look at, you don't have to answer all the questions that are not required. There these nuanced questions like how much can you afford to pay each year for college. We provide some guidance around how to answer those things. When they're doing the deep dive on your business and stuff like this, we'll spend some time there as well. And then we want them to understand, how this works if you're a two household family, right? So if you're divorced, separated, you're a single mom or a single dad, or we try to be pretty thorough in terms of catching most or all family dynamics and talking about, okay, if you fit into this bucket, what do you need to know? And obviously that gets a little bit more complex when we're talking about split household families, but I think we do a pretty good job elaborating on that. And then also talking about what if you're in one of these unfortunate situations where the non-custodial parent is, we don't know where they are, or they're not willing to cooperate, or maybe it's even, it could be a potentially dangerous situation if we're even in contact with this parent, right? So we'll go through applying for the non-custodial waiver and how that works, and again, try to make sure that everybody leaves crystal clear on, okay, based on my family dynamic, here's my marching orders. And then let's see. Yeah, and then again, early in the process, our goal when it comes to appeals is being like, guys, this is a thing. So let's at least plant the seed to say, hey, we're going to have this mentality that although once we get accepted to schools, we're going to get an initial offer, and it's certainly presented as take it or leave it. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. And again, here's some best practices of when it's appropriate to go back to colleges, and how some of the X's and O's in terms of how we do that. And again, let me just, and obviously, Cody, you just cut me off whenever it's time to pass the baton here, please. But if it makes sense, I'll just show you, just quickly run through a couple of the slides that we share on our kind of more in-depth FAFSA and CSS presentation here. Part of it's a mentality thing, right? We'll talk to people about, like, look, take breaks. You don't have to complete this all at once. There's a way to fix mistakes. If you make mistakes, all is not lost. You are not going to ruin your kids' college experience. But we'll talk about, okay, here's why everybody should submit forms, right? And talk through that. Again, even if you're not applying for financial aid, here's why we think it makes sense to complete the FAFSA. We'll even start with divorced parents initially when we do this presentation. And then we kind of talk about, again, best practices where, for example, it's easier, it's less clunky if the student completes their part of the FAFSA first and then invites the parent, right? It just, again, it's, for those of you that experience, just the way that this new tech works for them, that's the less clunky way. There's this weird thing where if you are a two-parent household, and you complete and they ask you for both of your parents on a parent section, you don't want to give them the second parent's info, okay? Because again, that makes it clunkier. You want to wait until you get into the parent section to give the other parents information here. So just kind of some wonky stuff where we're trying to help families get through this in a way that it's going to be most the smoothest, right? And the quickest. And again, and we'll always talk about, all right, don't make these big mistakes, right? The 529 is your money, not the students. Don't put your home equity on the FAFSA, retirement accounts, et cetera, et cetera. And similar process for the College Board. We'll do a combination of, like, actually going into the form live and then some screenshots. And again, just trying to do some best practice stuff here where you have to answer all required questions, of course. You don't have to answer non-required questions, and don't over-rotate on that. Don't lose sleep on it. There's nothing wrong with not answering questions that are not required, right? And again, just helping them avoid all the common mistakes that are pretty easy in here. And again, all our presentations are recorded, and they'll get the slides and the recordings and have the opportunity to ask, live, right? We always have, today aside, obviously, but we always have at least two presenters. And one of the biggest reasons, number one, is to make this terribly boring subject matter a little bit more dynamic, right? Where they get to hear more than one voice. We get to play off each other a little bit. But whoever's not talking is going to own Q&A. So I think we do a really good job and our goal is to always get, we don't always hit it depending on the size of the crowd, but to get to every question in Q&A. And that's a nice thing about these things being virtual because people, I think the opportunity to ask maybe really, personal questions, right, that they wouldn't otherwise ask in front of a room full of their peers, but they can anonymously ask here. So, yeah, I think those are kind of the biggies here. And again, my colleague Peg Cody, I think you've seen her. She always like there's a picture of her dog, and she's always kind of working in more this like uh emotional stuff of like trying to bring the temperature down and like remember like these forms are stressful and annoying, but you know, let's look at a cute puppy for a little bit. You know, do your version of that. So I knew I obviously flew through that, but I wanted to be conscious of your time, Cody, and hopefully give you know, a decent overview of what we try to cover in those presentations.
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree with the dog picture. We need to keep it light.
Right.
But I again appreciate your time being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge and resources. We did have, I was monitoring the chat on our side. We do have a request for slides, of course. We'll make sure to share those out to attendees. And otherwise, we will go ahead and transition at this point and hopefully have some time for a question and answer at the end. So if you have something pressing, please feel free to toss it in the chat. We'll get to it at the end. And if we don't have time, we'll make sure to keep you all connected to our team and or Matt and make sure those answers are getting to you. So, but thank you again, Matt. I think it is my turn on the agenda, and part of that is a great segue. Let me see if I can share my screen because I'm going to specify, if I can find the right one. I'm going to specify on some aid year information and making sure, speaking of deadlines and things, that we're up to date on current students, former students, and this current 11th grade rising senior class that is quickly going to become our FAFSA targets. So again, my name is Cody Eden, FAFSA coordinator, Department of Higher Education. Speaking of those aid years, we've got a couple different things happening right now. This slide here is to hopefully help us clarify for students 24-25 versus 25-26. The 24-25 cycle is soon wrapping up. They're still using those 2022 tax returns. You heard Matt talk about prior. That's something that you'll get used to if you're new to this world. But the prior tax year for a student starting in the 2024-2025 year, prior would be 2022, and you'll see that theme continue. The 24-25 cycle is going to close up June 30, 2025. Most likely, if you're on this call, you're not worried about 25-20, you're not worried about 24-25. You're most likely looking at 25-26 or even the following year. So if you are a current senior sitting in this chair, or you are a counselor supporting current seniors, the 25-26 has been our focus, applying to those 3 terms listed. And then it does use the 2023 tax return for that prior. I think best advice, if summer term is something that's on your student's radar, just to make sure we're contacting that financial aid office at the school, confirming everything's ready to go for that summer term. If there's anything specific around FAFSA aid years, always verify with the school directly. So much more exciting, I think, for our current rising seniors, the class of 2026. As you all finish up your junior year, you're likely already starting these steps. So we want to make sure you understand, again, that prior, you all will be using 2024 tax returns starting school the 26-27 year. And unlike the past 2 years, your form for the class of 2026 actually opens what we call on time. It is back to October 1st is the expected release of the 26-27 FAFSA form. So once you hit the fall, you'll likely start to get information. You'll get settled into your senior year, and then October 1 will hit, your FAFSA is available, and you can actually fill it out. Now, one step you can do prior to that, several steps actually, is creating your account. Creating your account is something you can do anytime prior to your senior year. It's something that will stay with you year to year, so not something you're going to be duplicating. We're going to talk a little bit more on FSAID/studentaid.gov accounts in just a moment. But in addition to creating that account and getting your process started, you want to make sure you're asking questions already about your dependency status, who might your contributors be on the form, and then of course, continuing your research along cost of attendance specific to your schools and utilizing resources like you've seen in this presentation. In terms of that studentaid.gov account, I will specify the language is changing, was FSAID, now it's going to be studentaid.gov account. We'll see if it changes again on us, but just know those are going to be used interchangeably. And it's just literally your account to create and submit the FAFSA. These accounts are specific to the individual. So you as the student will have one, your contributors will have their own accounts as applicable. And this is essentially your electronic signature and consent to transfer tax information to the FAFSA form. So important to be diligent as you're creating these accounts. It's helpful to be with your parent or contributors as they create theirs separately as well, just to make sure you're all on the same page. It does have a bit of a time to process with the Social Security Administration, but 1 to 3 days later after you submit, they're basically verifying, yes, this is you, and then you are ready to use that account once your FAFSA form opens. Again, if you're a junior, that 26-27 form will not be available until October 1st for you. We always have students do the prior year on accident. It's okay if that happens, but please be diligent with your aid year based on when you are starting college. There are some other resources attached there, kind of start to finish what you need to know about FSAID studentaid.gov accounts. There's the federal YouTube videos are attached there, as well as our Colorado Department of Higher Ed resources as well. Super crucial just to make sure you're very accurate with your information, because we can see very minor details, cross hairs and cause issues with tying your account to a parent contributor to allow that to join. So please be very careful when you're making your accounts and when you're tying those to your parent or contributors. This slide has some other tips and tricks, of course. Use personal emails, not sharing them, being very diligent with that information. And even a good pro tip is taking a picture of the account demographic information on each other's accounts and just ensuring, triple check everything is entirely accurate when you make that match happen as you complete the FAFSA. I am going to transition very briefly here because I know this is a pressing topic, but student loan repayment is very much in the news right now. As we all know, as of the 5th of May, those collections have resumed for default student loans. That pause has been in place for 5 years through the COVID times. We don't have a lot more information to expand upon beyond this, but I do encourage folks utilize the resources in front of us to get ahead of questions. I myself was still a borrower. Maybe you have former students reaching out with questions. So hopefully we can use some of this information to share with folks. The Federal Student Aid Information Center has extended their hours specific to these questions. So their link is there, as well as the phone number to direct if needed. And then some other helpful information, some specific to Colorado and our consumer information, as well as just some basic federal student loan overview. Hopefully some of this is helpful to share with your families, maybe helpful for yourself, but feel free to reach out with questions, and I'm certainly happy to help as those questions come up. I think I have blown through my piece here. My contact information is there. We'll have it at the end as well. But at this point, I will be transitioning over to Sophie Vogel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cody. I am as well going to share my screen and talk to you all about some CASFA stuff. Let's make sure this is all working. You all can see that, right? Great. So I'm sharing some information about a CASFA announcement. So the announcement is CASFA has a new software vendor. So the Colorado Department of Higher Education went through the request for proposal process and selected Nelnet to be the new CASFA vendor. The Nelnet contract starts in the new fiscal year, so that's July 1st, 2025. So what does this mean to all of you? So CDHE will communicate details of this transition to all of you. So details such as the URL to access the CASFA is has the name of our prior vendor in the URL, so that will probably be changing. Additionally, some training on the new CASFA. So there will be training for students and contributors. Also, of course, for financial aid office staff. And then if some of you work with high school students as high school counselors or advisors, there will be some training for you as well. It's sort of training between the two, if that makes sense. You're like the liaison between the students and contributors and the financial aid office. So again, the transition starts July 1st, 2025, and it basically will go through September 1st, 2025, which is to say at some point but during those 2 months, we will go from our current system to our new system. We're looking at closer to the end of August. However, those are details I do not have yet. And like I said, we will communicate about this transition as soon as we know more. New aid year is opening October 1st, 2025. So the 26-27 aid year that Cody was talking about, and Cody was giving a lot of details about the new aid year. This is going to be for students who currently are in 11th grade. They'll be in 12th grade next year. Those students, their financial aid applications, both FAFSA and CASFA, will be opening October 1st, 2025. And then the aid year they'll be completing is the 26-27 aid year. So that hopefully is helpful. So how can I get these CASFA updates? First, please check our website. We'll be posting updates as soon as they become available. So that's one good resource. Another resource is the outreach newsletter. If you would like to subscribe, you can find it on our website, or you can use this QR code. We will, of course, be sending out updates in the outreach newsletter as well. So that is another good source of information. One other fun piece that we can always talk about is the CASFA eligibility expansion. I did want to point out briefly that more information about the CASFA eligibility expansion is in our previous Lunch and Learns, so you're welcome to review them. The recordings are posted online, as well as presentations. So the CASFA eligibility expansion messaging for high school counselors and other advisors and others who support high school students. So some of you are in that position. So the messaging is this: students should complete one financial aid application, FAFSA or CASFA, not both. So if you're working with high school students, you should emphasize that first-time FAFSA filers may utilize the CASFA eligibility expansion, specifically students from mixed immigration status families or other situations. So a first-time CASFA filer is a student whose contributors have not made an FSA ID or a studentaid.gov account for an older sibling, right? If there's somebody who is in 12th grade next year, but they have an older sibling who's 20, this may or not be relevant to them. It is something that family needs to figure out. So a student who's eligible for federal student aid, which is FSA, but their contributors prefer not to share their data beyond Colorado higher education institutions, may choose to forfeit FSA and complete a CASFA to demonstrate eligibility for state and institutional aid only. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Here, of course, is my contact information. I feel like there might have been one in the chat, but feel free to reach out to me with questions anytime. Thank you all. That was a pretty quick presentation.
Great. I think I'm next. I just want to, thanks for that, Sophie and Cody. So just going to provide you with some resources for summer melt. Summer melt is a common problem, especially among low-income students. Many high school graduates who have been accepted to college and say that they plan to enroll are kind of knocked off course on occasion if they don't obtain some significant financial aid and they miss certain deadlines or lack the support from family and educators over the summer. So NCAN has this, the National College Attainment Network, and I'll put this in the chat, has this great, you can click that link there. They have these great resources to help you with combating the summer melt. There's a toolkit in there, some approaches from the field, some other strategies, and they even have this really neat thing, texting strategies. So if your institution or high school has a texting feature, they have some information in there regarding texting, as well as some other best practices from other school districts around the nation. So please check that out. Also, Denver Scholarship Foundation has some resources as well, and I will put that link in the chat. So these are just some nice resources to help you combat the summer melt. There is, there's the chat. Too many screens open. There you go. And I will pass it on over to Jen.
Thanks, Twyla. Normally, I would give our upcoming events at this time, but to be honest, there aren't a lot of events going on since it is the end of the year. I will share our events page though. If there are any upcoming events, you can find them there. You can also find the event request form on that page. So if you do have an event coming up, it's a good time to start thinking about October 1st because we know the FAFSA will be opening October 1st for sure. So it could be a good time to start thinking about that. Feel free to hit us up for any ideas. You will also find my office hours as well as Sophie and Cody's office hours on that webpage as well. And if there is an event that you're having that you would just like us to help promote, feel free to email us at that email on there. It's the outreach email. And then we can help promote your event on that page as well. But we sure do appreciate you joining us for the Lunch and Learns. Again, we know it's your lunch hour, so we do appreciate it. We have created a survey that we are hoping you will take the time to fill out. I'm going to, let's see, share the link. I don't know if that's the link. Sorry. Let me grab the link. And it's just a few questions. I think it's like 9 or 10 questions, so very few questions, but we want to be sure that we are utilizing this time to give you the best information possible. So again, just click that link and answer those questions. Thanks, Twyla.
All right. So do we have any questions? I don't see any in the chat, but if anybody would like to come off mute and ask any questions or pose them in the chat, we're more than happy to ask any questions, answer any questions.
Yeah, I have one quick one. So I work with a lot of kids that are in DYS, and there's a point in the FAFSA form where I can't remember if the section's called like living situation or something along those lines, but we were told by someone at FAFSA this year that we have to select incarcerated for this section. And I was just curious, like what the, I guess when do we have to select that for the kid and when do we not have to select that? What are sort of the, boundaries around that?
You want to take that, Cody, or do you want me to jump in right here?
Feel free to jump in if you can, Matt. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, so for I don't know that there's a perfect or clean answer to this or situations like this. Our general mentality has been for students, and it sounds like the ones you're describing that should be treated as independents, right? Which I think is what you're describing here. However, we have to get that across the finish line in such a way that they are treated as independents has been something that we're totally comfortable with. We've talked to a lot of colleges about this, and that has been, really the general consensus feedback. So, look, as long as you're not trying to take advantage of the system and being dishonest, about the fact that the kid is independent, whatever one of those boxes that we have to check that is as close to getting us towards the situation or the reality of the situation, I think is what you do, right? But you just err on the side of like, look, this student needs to be treated as an independent. They should be treated as an independent. We're going to get the FAFSA across the finish line in any way that we can that's representative of that. And then we'll have the individual conversations with each of these colleges to say, here's what's going on. Here's why we decided to check this box. And again, so my kind of short answer to that would be like, don't rotate on it too much. For these types of kids that are independents, that should be treated as independents, check a box that's as close to the situation as you think, given again where they're at and what the options are, and then again just get ready to have a conversation with each of these schools individually. That's basically how we coach it.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we were just curious because when we think of incarceration, we don't necessarily think of a kid being placed in a detention center for a couple months. You know what I mean? So we just didn't want to, provide any false information anywhere. But that's what we were told to do this year for a couple of our students.
Yeah, some of these are just, they don't fit into the neat little boxes that
Right.
were being
Yeah.
offered.
Thank you.
Great. I see there was a question in the chat, and then Cody said that he has emailed Dallas, so I think we're good on that. Any more questions?
Actually, I'm gonna maybe share my screen really quick. Hey, everyone, this is Sophie. I just pulled up the page on the FAFSA that might be helpful to that recent question. So this is in the prototype. And so I just cruised in, and under personal circumstances, this is student unusual circumstances. So do unusual circumstances prevent the student from contacting their parents, or would contacting their parents pose a risk to the student? So this is where somebody who's with Division of Youth Services, they might put a yes here, potentially, depending on because it says are incarcerated, or their parents are incarcerated, etc. So, or a student may be experiencing unusual circumstances so it's under student unusual circumstances, under personal circumstances, where you will find this one. And then just to go back to Dallas's question about McKinney-Vento student. So if a student is completing the FAFSA and they say yes, about student homelessness because they're McKinney-Vento students, then maybe they're going to put here high school McKinney-Vento liaison and continue, and then the student is an independent student. So I just thought I would point that out in case that's helpful. Same with if you go no here and then you say, oh, well, anyway, it's because I got stuck in the other circumstance. Hopefully that was helpful. Sometimes I think the prototype tool is really valuable. So use it if you can.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Yes, and I definitely echo advocating with the school following any of these submissions too. If you think it's borderline, or hey, we're going to submit as independently provisional right now, following up with that school, making sure we empower students to do so is huge. So just certainly encouraging that, as we already do. Thank you for pulling.
Great. Any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Matt, for joining us today from College Aid Pro and all the CDHE outreach team. We appreciate you all. And again, we will post this recording on our website, so please check there. Probably in about a week or so, it will be on there. And we look forward to having these in the next school year. Thank you so much.